Hey guys, back here with another video, and today we are finally going to review Spider-Man 3. But just like in my previous Spider-Man movie reviews, I will not be reviewing this movie alone. Just like in my last videos, I am going to review this with my special guest here, the one, the only, the amazing Evan Filarca.
Hi, true believers. Thank you so much for having me. No Punisher. I cannot wait to review this movie with you to complete our review series for the Tobey Maguire movie.
Yep. So, when this movie came out, this movie has pretty much gotten some negative reviews. Some people keep hating it, you know. But, um, what were your first impressions when you saw this movie for the first time?
So when this movie came out in 2007, I was 9 years old, and when I saw the trailer of this movie in 2006, when they showed the teaser trailer for Spider-Man 3, and they showed the freaking black suit in its epicness in the nighttime at a church, and they showed that final scene in the trailer where he's hanging upside down and he sees the red suit version of himself in the window. I lost my mind. This was my
Yes.
most anticipated movie of all time. I knew for a fact when I saw the trailer it was going to be better than Spider-Man. Like so, every Spider-Man movie that came out at that time, Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, I knew that Tobey was coming back. You know, everyone was coming back. James Franco, Tobey Maguire, Kristen Dunst. And then I was really excited for the villain of Sandman, but then I mainly cared about Venom because, oh my god, Venom is my favorite Spider-Man villain of all time, and the fact that they made Venom in this movie was incredible. But then, of course, the final result wasn't what I expected at all. But that doesn't mean I didn't like it. I did like it, but it wasn't what I was expecting.
Yes, and we will get to that in just a minute. But I like to go ahead and give my first impression. So, when I saw this teaser trailer for this movie for the first time in 2006, I was literally blown, and it became my most anticipated film for 2007. And the reason why, in fact, you may already know the reason why this became my most anticipated movie for 2007. It's when I saw the black suit. This is the first time I have ever seen an incarnation of the black suit and Venom, I think, as well. But oh my gosh, I was blown away because I kept getting all of these Burger King toys of the movie because I wanted to get a lot of merchandise from this movie because it became my most anticipated movie for that year. But um, yeah, that's what my first impression was when I saw that movie, and I got to see it in 2008, a year later. And in fact, by the time of this recording, it has already been a decade since this movie came out.
That's absolutely crazy. I know that because Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007. It's now 2017. It's literally been a whole 10 years, a whole decade since it released. And I still remember it to this day seeing it with my dad in theaters because I did apparently see Spider-Man 2 in theaters, but I barely remember it because that movie came out in 2004 when Spider-Man 2 came out in 2004, and I was 6 years old at the time, and I was just like not aware of it because I was so young. But I mainly remember seeing Spider-Man 3 in the theaters with my dad because I was so excited for that movie, and I saw it in theaters, and I loved when I saw it the first time. Although as a kid, I was upset at the end that there was no final swing, but looking upon it now, I love how the ending of that movie happened, and I will explain why when we continue our review.
Yeah, because we don't want to get into the ending a bit yet, but I think it's pretty much safe. And even though I've said this in our previous reviews for the Spidey films, but I think it's pretty much safe to talk about spoilers for this film because I'm pretty sure everyone's seen it by now because it's already been a decade since this movie came out. Don't you agree?
Definitely.
All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Spider-Man 3. Let's start off with the beginning of the movie. And as usual, in the beginning of each Spider-Man movie, Peter Parker would always narrate.
Yes, although he did not narrate in the second movie. I believe so. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, he did.
Yeah, he
Sorry.
did at the
Sorry,
beginning.
he did. You're right. You're right. Because in the beginning he was on his moped and then he almost crashed into Mr. Z's in the pizza shop. Yeah, that's right. So you're right. He did narrate in all those movies. Which is very funny to think about. But mainly with Spider-Man 3, how he narrated in the beginning, it was like he was Spider-Man for a while. And he was Spider-Man for such a long time that he's like now finally being recognized as a hero of New York City. People look up to Spider-Man in the city of New York, and loads of people worship Spider-Man in the city. And he was given like the key of the city in one scene where he saved Gwen Stacy and just showcased kind of that bigger Spider-Man universe where they actually showcased Gwen Stacy, Captain Stacy, Eddie Brock. There were some hints, Robbie Robertson, Rand Robertson, Robbie Robertson's son, I believe, and they just really dove well into the bigger Spider-Man universe in Spider-Man 3, and I have to give props to Sam Raimi for that, for actually doing a really good job of kind of showcasing these characters in the movie. Granted, Gwen Stacy was more like Mary Jane, and Mary Jane was more like Gwen Stacy, funny enough,
Yeah.
but I still liked how they portrayed all the characters in the movie, especially when Tobey Maguire got the black suit in the movie and then he became emo Peter. I love that so much. One of the standout performances, which I have to give to, is James Franco as Harry Osborn. To this day, I still believe James Franco is Harry Osborn. I think Harry Osborn / Norman. I think James Franco, his best role as an actor so far in his whole career has been Harry Osborn in the Spider-Man movies. I think he killed it as that character. And throughout the three movies that we got were Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man kills Norman. Harry finds out that Spider-Man killed Norman, and he vows to take revenge on Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2, Harry finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. He unmasks Spider-Man and finds out it's Peter. In the third movie, we get this whole build-up that we've been waiting for since the other two movies of Peter versus Harry, where Harry has the Goblin glider tech and goes after Peter, and then near the end of the movie where he blows Harry's face up with the grenade, it shows that really, really cool relationship between friendship and enemies and passion and hatred and sadness and love. It's a really cool dynamic that Sam Raimi put in that movie, and I love how they handled it. That's one of the standout things about that.
Yeah, I have to agree. But I actually really like the beginning of the movie where we get introduced to Spidey saying, "My life's great. Everyone in New York City loves Spider-Man now, and my girlfriend's great," and blah 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 and that stuff. And then after that, and before we get to the whole Harry Osborn as the new Goblin thing, this is a scene we have to talk about. It's that one scene where before they start fighting, Peter meets with his Aunt May, and I was absolutely shocked when this scene happened. He asked Aunt May that he was gonna marry Mary Jane, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that was a big standout moment in the movie. Especially though, one thing that people did not like about that movie was the whole explanation from Aunt May about where Aunt May and Uncle Ben were together on the beach, and they just kind of like fell in love for the first time. That whole story portion, a lot of people didn't like. I found it very touching.
Yes, same here.
To the story at hand with Peter and MJ, and yeah, Peter wants to propose to Mary Jane, and it was so touching how he wanted to do it, but then it didn't work out in his old black suit.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that yet, because I want to save best for last.
Exactly. I love how the story though unfolded with that whole dynamic between Peter and MJ with being married, and how it ended in the movie is very heart-touching and very sad at the same time, but I do love how they wanted to have that happen in the movie, and how I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the newly released Legacy collection for the Spider-Man movies with the Spider-Man 3.1, we finally have the extended version of Spider-Man 3. There is a scene, I believe, or at least it talks about a scene where Peter and MJ get married. Like, they get full-on married, they have a wedding and everything. I do believe there's a scene like that. I'm not
Oh
sure,
yes.
though.
Speaking of,
But it's very cool that was their vision. That was their vision, that they wanted those two to get married, and they stuck with that, and they were dedicated to it, and it was awesome.
yes. Before stuff, I want to talk about the black suit, but we're gonna save that for last because we're getting close to talking about some stuff I have to talk about with some black suit scenes. But anyway, after that whole asking that he's gonna marry MJ, we finally get to that fight, and I have to say that fight was really, really good. And just like what my good friend Evan here said, first two movies were building up to this moment to where Harry Osborn would go to fight Peter, and I really love that scene. Great fight scene, and I love that scene where during the fight where he throws those goblin bombs, and they are those like flying thingies. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they are called Razorbats.
Yeah, and then Peter's like, "Man, I hate those things." Because I actually
Yeah,
really do like those things. They're pretty cool. And I really like the new Goblin.
It was a callback to the first movie with that iconic scene in the first movie where he's dodging
Yeah.
the Razorbat in the burning building, where he does that iconic dodging moment. In Spider-Man 3, they do a callback to where Harry has him now, and then he gets cut up again, which is crazy. And I love it.
Yeah, and then after that scene, of course, Harry gets beaten up, and then he has to go to the hospital. Because after that, after he ends up in the hospital, Harry doesn't remember hating Spider-Man for killing his father and that stuff, and he doesn't remember that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And
yeah, he had amnesia, and that was really cool how they played that during the movie, where Harry was like he was old Harry again. He was his older self from the high school days, and he was very nice and sweet. And then they had that kind of relationship with MJ and Harry. It was really cool because it showed that kind of dynamic between MJ with her, kind of high school fling, and then Peter, her true love. And then the scene where Harry, after that whole scene where MJ and Harry have that day together in his flat, his house, and then Harry's kind of upset, and then he kind of looks in the mirror, and then he kind of starts to remember it, and then he sees Norman Osborn in the mirror, his dad, and he has all the flashes come back to him, and once he remembers everything, which is really cool. And I love how we could have had a world where Harry would have been fine, Peter could totally have his total normal life, and Harry could be normal Harry, he wouldn't know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and Peter could be with MJ, and Harry and Peter could still be best friends. It could have been a normal, totally average, nice life, but then, of course, it never goes good for Spider-Man. And then this whole scene happens where Harry forces MJ to break up with Peter in order for him to not kill Peter, which is really cool. And how that mind play, that inner struggle mind play that Harry tried to pull out on Peter is very cool. And it's also kind of like how Norman Osborn saw Peter more of a son than he did with Harry. And he kind of wanted to do that back to Peter. Harry wanted to kind of take what he loved, which was MJ, and flip it on his head with MJ, with Harry, and also just MJ breaking up with Peter, causing Peter to go back into the black suit again, pointing that the black suit is like a drug for Peter. Whenever things aren't going his way, he used the black suit to let out, which is very cool how they use that in the movie.
so you're saying that it was a cool idea how they had him have like amnesia, and then when he like does certain stuff, like for example when he catches that basketball, he'll start like getting flashes and remember who he is. And like what you said, he wants to do something with Peter since his dad saw Peter as a son, as he didn't really see Harry as a son to him. And then he decides to like do that to Peter and MJ by having them break up. All right. But that was a good scene where they fought for the first time in the movie. Let's talk about Sandman before that fight scene happens. I have to say, Sandman was pretty darn good in the movie. I thought he was a good villain.
He was great. The cast was perfect. Thomas Hayden Church as Flint Marko / Sandman was a great choice, and he really wanted to make it a more personal role with the daughter, Petty Marko, and the way that they played that relationship out was very touching and very sweet. And even though in the main movie they didn't really get to expand upon that whole dynamic with the daughter and Sandman, but it was very heavily implied. And in the editor's cut, we got an extra scene with the daughter and Sandman, which was very touching, where he turns into a sandcastle. It was very cute. But in the movie, it's still heavily shown that he's a family man. He cares about his family, his daughter specifically, and how the daughter is the one thing that he cares about in this world after his whole tragic accident with the sand machine turning him into Sandman. It's after he disintegrates into sand, where he just turns into a whole pile of sand, and then where they cut back to him forming into Sandman. When I was a kid, I didn't really like that scene, because I was just like, I just want to see Spider-Man and Venom. But seeing it again as an adult, like a couple years ago when I saw Spider-Man 3 again, it's just, that scene is gorgeous. That's one of the most breathtaking moments of CGI I've ever seen in a movie.
Yes, that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
I think we all can agree that that scene where he's becoming Sandman, right, when he's like fixing his body out of sand, is one of the best CGI parts of like a movie. That's something I think we all can agree on, because the CGI was really good in this movie. Same with Spider-Man 2. Maybe not Spider-Man 1 as people keep saying, but I thought it was alright. The CGI for Sandman in that scene right there was perfect.
That's the thing. Whatever people say about Spider-Man 1, when they say that the CGI in Spider-Man 1 wasn't great, two things. You gotta remember that Spider-Man 1 came out in 2002, so CGI was kind of a brand new technology that they were still trying to work on, perfect. So I see that at the time, the graphics aren't good, but at the time also, that was just amazing how they handled the CGI. I personally think that the CGI in the 2002 Spider-Man movie is better than what we're seeing right now with Spider-Man Homecoming. And also with Spider-Man 3, that is, though, I think, despite what people say in Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man 3 has Spider-Man movie to this date. It's better than the Amazing Spider-Man movies. It's better than the other Spider-Man movies. And the Raimi Trilogy in general just has breathtaking CGI. And Spider-Man Homecoming is what we see, where you see a close-up of Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming. You can see that, like, the digital effects are still there. And then you see Spider-Man 3 with that whole scene where Peter is getting the black suit on him for the first time, where the black suit is crawling up his body and expanding on his body and everything. That was amazing. How they handled that was breathtaking. That's a feat of digital animation right there. And specifically, though, the Sandman scene, fun fact, it was said that the Sandman scene where he becomes Sandman took animators a full year to do.
Whoa.
Which is absolutely insane.
I guess that's why it turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. It turned out to be really good.
Yeah. So after that whole Sandman transformation, Spider-Man, we get introduced to Gwen Stacy, and Spider-Man saves her after falling off a building. And I'm sure you guys know this YouTube channel, but there's a YouTube channel called How It Should Have Ended, and it's basically where they like show things that could have gone a lot more better in the movies. And when I watched the How It Should Have Ended for this movie, that one scene where Gwen is hanging on that building, where his dad's like, "Who is that?" And then Eddie Brock is like, "That's your daughter." And then his dad, her dad is like, "What's she doing?" And then Stanley is just all of a sudden is like, "She's trying not to fall off a building. What is wrong with you people?" And now that I watch that, I kind of think that kind of felt a little bit weird. He's like, what is she doing up there? I mean, it's pretty darn obvious that she's hanging on a building from her death. Yeah, and I'll link that How It Should Have Ended in the description down below if you want to check it out, because it's funny. And it's like the first one I ever watched from their channel. But that scene where Spider-Man the CGI and where you see Spider-Man like dodging those stuff falling from the building was great! It's the best CGI I've ever seen. And that scene where he saves Gwen was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Oh yeah, and then after that, they have this little parade for Spider-Man, which was really, really cool because of how in this movie New York all love Spider-Man now. It's really cool how they set up a little parade for Spider-Man, and you can see him swinging and giving high fives to everyone. That was a great scene, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, and that one scene I need to talk about where Gwen kisses Spidey was actually pretty good because it kind of sets up a whole jealousy thing going on, because this is something I actually really like, whether it's like movies or books or whatever, is to have a little jealousy in the story. And I think that's something this movie did a really good job with, MJ being so jealous that Gwen stole MJ and Spidey's kiss, like how they did in the first movie. It's something I really like about that scene, is how it kind of sets up a whole jealousy within the story and later on.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we have the Sandman fight scene, which was great. And then, yeah, and then after that, we have that scene where Peter is on a date with MJ, and he, in that date, he plans to tell Mary Jane that he wants to marry her, but of course, as we all know, she was pretty mad at Peter for having Gwen steal their kiss in the first movie, and then she just leaves the date. And I really like that scene in the movie. Even though this movie gets a lot of hate, there are a lot of things I did like. And then one scene we need to talk about before we get to the cool part is the scene where Peter learns that Peter didn't kill his actual Uncle Ben's killer. And Uncle Ben's killer happens to be, spoiler alert, Flint Marko, the Sandman. And I really love that scene where he is in absolute shock, seeing how this man was the man that actually killed his uncle. Because I'm sure someone like that in real life would actually react to something like this, to where they want to hunt down the actual killer. Because I see it happen in a lot of shows and movies and that stuff. And I'm sure that's how it would have been like in real life. I really like about that movie is that scene right here.
Right.
And then the one scene we have to talk about after that is the black suit's transformation. And oh my gosh, that scene was awesome, and I love the introduction to the black suit. It was perfect. It was the same introduction they did with the black suit in the 90s animated series.
I loved it too.
Yeah, it was the same thing from the... Yeah, I really love the introduction for the black suit in this movie. Same with the 90s animated series, but the introduction in the comics is a lot more different, which we don't want to get too much into, 'cause I don't want to make this too long. But I was Sandman again, but this time in the black suit, which was amazing. Definitely one of the best fight scenes in the movie. Now people are going to kill me for saying bite instead of fight. I guess I'll just have to use the symbiote myself to get rid of those people that hate me for saying that now. But yeah, that was a great scene. And I love how after... Actually, do you have any opinions on that? Because I feel like I'm taking up all the room to share opinions on these scenes.
No, I think you're doing a great job. I'm sure. I totally agree. This movie's just great overall. This is my fourth favorite Spider-Man movie, but that doesn't mean I hate it any more than I don't hate any of the movies from Spider-Man, because I like all of them.
Yeah, same here, actually.
My fourth favorite one, and I just love this movie.
Yeah, and I love how after he fights Sandman in the black suit and thinks that he kills him, I love that one scene where he's walking in the alleyway and he brings his hair down to show like a dark image of him as like a bad evil person, because that's something I would do. Because in fact, my hairstyle, even though I don't show my face in my videos, but my my hairstyle is actually the same as Tobey Maguire's hairstyle from the Spider-Man movies. I would show
Right.
you right now, but I don't want to. Not ready for face reveal. But if I did show you, you could see it's kind of similar. But I really like that scene where he shows that he's becoming bad. And then when he goes to his apartment, that one dude that he has to pay rent for, so then Peter can be in his apartment. I like how he screams, "Shut up! I'll pay your rent when you fix this door." And I really
Yeah.
like that scene because it kind of sets up the whole bad side of Peter Parker, which I really like. Cause I like seeing the bad side of heroes sometimes because it's really interesting. And then later he'll go to apologize to him.
Right. I love it. It's too good.
Yeah, and then of course, like we discussed earlier, he starts hanging out with Harry, and then he'll eventually figure out. He'll eventually remember his other life that he forgot, to where he thinks Peter kills his dad and that stuff, and then of course you know what happens. He gets them to break up, and then that's when they fight again. Except he fights them in the black suit, and man, that fight scene was gorgeous.
Super gorgeous.
Yeah, and I actually pretty much I noticed how in most of Spider-Man's fight in the movie, he always like shoots a web, and I'm actually pretty impressed how he didn't shoot any webs during that scene, except for the end where Harry tried to throw that bomb at him, and then he shoots a web to throw it back at him, which would eventually scar his face.
Yeah, it was great. I love that, how they went that far with Harry in the story, and then he helped them out in the end, fighting Venom and Sandman, which was awesome.
Oh yeah, and then Eddie Brock. Oh my gosh, I forgot to talk about him, and I don't want to get into Venom yet because we got to save the best for last. But I thought the actor that played. I know a lot of people keeps thinking that the actor looks nothing like Eddie Brock, but I actually thought he looked like Eddie Brock from the '90s series. To be honest, a little bit. Because of like
Yeah.
the color of the hairstyle and that stuff. I thought he was pretty good. I thought he did a good job as Eddie Brock. Maybe not as Venom, but definitely Eddie Brock. And I like how after that fight with Harry, he goes to humiliate Eddie Brock for making everyone think that Spider-Man's a bad guy since he got the black suit going. Now he's stealing stuff. And I like how he humiliates him in that scene because I think it looks threatening in my opinion. And then, of course, Eddie
Right.
Brock gets fired. And then you see Peter Parker dancing around like that. What do we call him in that scene? Yumo Parker?
Yeah.
Yeah. He becomes Yumo Parker in that scene where he's dancing in the
Yeah.
street, which I find how people think that seems a bit weird and funny. But when I saw that movie for the first time and when I saw the scene, I actually thought it was okay, even though it was cheesy and weird. I thought it was pretty okay, even though I probably would have expected more for a dark and brooding Peter Parker with that black suit. We could have had like more
Right.
threatening moments. You could add some comedy in there, but there could have been a lot more threatening moments instead of those cheesy comedy scenes where he's dancing on the street like a weirdo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The dance scene was too good.
Yeah. And then of course we learn Sammy is alive, and then in the next scene, we see that Eddie Brock sees that Peter is dating Gwen Stacy, which makes him feel more humiliated and well. But I like that scene where he tries to impress Mary Jane by dancing for her, and she's doing all for her and that stuff, and it gets Gwen jealous.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really like that scene, especially how after that weird dancing in that scene in front of MJ, I like how some of her like bodyguards or whatever, whoever those people are like, "Is this man bothering you?" And then they start touching Peter and is like, "Get your hands off me!" And then he starts going berserk and beating them up like if he was like an actual thug. And I like how when he accidentally hits Mary Jane, he stops and like think about what he's doing, because I'm sure an
Yeah.
actual person would react to something like this, like going out of control, and your girl's there, and then when you accidentally hit, you realize what you're becoming.
I remember in the theater that I was watching the movie in 2007 when they showed that scene, the entire audience gasped when Peter hit an MJ, which I love. I love that people were that passionate about the movie at the time. They were shocked that they showed that scene. Peter flat out backhanded Mary Jane, and it was awesome that they did that in the movie. I mean, it wasn't awesome that they hit her, but it was awesome that they went that far to show that scene be played out, and the fact that it got that audience reaction where people were so enveloped into this movie, this relationship, these people. It's really cool that people cared that much.
Yeah, and I like how after that he goes into the black suit, and then when he's in the black suit sitting on that church building, he looks at himself and he's like, what have I become? And he realizes of what the black suit is doing because of how it's an alien life form from another planet. And so then we get to the really, really awesome scene in the movie where Peter Parker rips off the black suit off of him, and then you see Eddie Brock is in that room where, well, not exactly, but it's hard to describe where Eddie Brock is because I'm not the best describer or explainer, but I like how Eddie watches Peter Parker rip off the black suit and he's like, Peter, he's Spider-Man. And I really love that scene where he tries to rip off the black suit, of how it keeps consuming him, like what you said, of how the black suit is a drug. And I really love that scene. And I'm surprised they didn't show him naked in that scene. So I thought he was wearing pants when he ripped off the black suit when I saw it for the first time. But
it was awesome.
And also the transformation of Venom was perfect in my opinion. I don't care if anyone disagrees with me. It was great. Yes. And now we have to talk about the final battle in the movie. Before we get into the boss battle, fight, whatever. I like that scene where Peter Parker turns down marrying MJ, which I thought was a real good emotional scene in the movie.
I thought it was very touching how they ended the movie, showing these three movies be paid off in the end. Sadly, Harry dying, but also with MJ and Peter beginning their life together. Because at the end, it was very touching. Because, like I said earlier, there's no final swing. There's no final cool close-up shot of Spider-Man. It focuses on Peter. Because this whole story was about Peter. It was Peter's story. That's why in the beginning of the first movie, he's like, who am I? Are you sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. That whole great monologue that he gave, and how the whole series of the movies that we build up to for that whole span of time, it ends with Peter and MJ dancing together and in each other's arms. That stuff was very touching.
And speaking of scenes, I was actually surprised. I was a bit disappointed how we didn't have that much black suit scenes in the movie where he's wearing the black suit, because you only see him wear the black suit 3 times. First, he gets introduced in the black suit. Second, he fights Sandman. Then he goes to rip it off, but hopefully that fixings in the editor's cut. But the final battle was great. And I will agree with everyone that keeps saying this recently, but people say that Eddie Brock keeps showing his face too much because they're like, oh, who cares about this guy? I just want to see Venom, not this guy's ugly face. I do agree. I wish they showed Venom's face a lot more often rather than showing Eddie's Brock face coming out of the symbiote, you know?
Right. Yeah. That was one thing. I don't mind Topher Grace as Venom, but with the recent news that we have Tom Hardy as Venom now, Topher Grace is not even close to competing with the godness of Tom Hardy as Venom. But I think the design of Venom would be a better design for Carnage. If you look at it, he also says I. He says I all the time. He never said we. So that's what Carnage always says I. Venom always says we. So I think really they did a perfect design for Carnage, whereas I don't think they did a good design for Venom. They just made it red, then that would have been Carnage. But we got Venom. He was okay. I liked the fight where he had him in the sound cage. That was super cool, where he slammed the metal bars and then it kind of got the symbiote off of Eddie was really cool. But yeah, I think it would have been a much better Carnage instead of Eddie Brock.
Yeah, but I really love the final battle. Spider-Man versus Venom, something I've wanted to see all day, and I think the design on Venom in this movie was actually really, really good. Because I actually saw some early concepts for Venom's look in the movie, and it didn't look that great, but it looked a lot more better in this movie. But the final fight scene was great with New Goblin, Sandman, Spider-Man, and Venom. In that final scene, in the final fight for Venom, right when he takes off, right when he takes Eddie Brock out of the symbiote, I love that scene. How the Venom is like becoming this huge monster, and then he starts making noise and throws the bomb, and then we see Harry's funeral, and then we see a happy ending with Peter and Mary Jane.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yep. So, have any other thoughts before we should go ahead and give our final verdicts?
I think I've covered everything, and yeah, this is my fourth favorite Spider-Man movie of all time, and I just really love how they handled this movie.
So, would you like to go first again, or would you like me to go first this time, since you went first twice?
You can go first this time.
Okay, because I think, if you saw my 2 reviews of the first 2 Spider-Man movies, I gave both of those movies 10 out of 10s. But after rewatching this movie during spring break, I'm going to lower my score a bit, specifically for this movie, because everyone else already sees the first 2 films as classics, but not really Spider-Man 3. So, for my final verdict for this movie, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It is a pretty good movie. I think it is a really good movie, but there were some stuff I was a bit mad about. So, I pretty much gave my score. So, what's your score gonna be?
So, looking back at my scores, I gave the first Spider-Man movie a 9. I gave the second movie an 8. And now I'm giving this one a 7. I know it goes down all the time, but I do like this movie a lot. Again, if I had to give the first one another score, I think I would have given it a 10, but I think 9 is pretty good because I love that movie. That is my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time, is the first Tobey Maguire movie. But this one just did a great job overall. You know, a lot of people don't like it. I do like it. I think it's really good. I think what they tried to do was a really great task, and the way they handled it was just very cool. So and the only gripe why I gave it a 7 is because the whole dancing scene, I love it, and I wish they had more time in the black suit.
Yes, and I will agree with you on what you said. I thought Venom was great. I understand if they made him short and saved him for the finale. I thought that was perfectly fine. But I will agree with you on what you just said. Because, again, even when I saw this for the first time, I was a bit disappointed on how they didn't show that much black suit scenes. Because I really want to see more scenes where Spider-Man is in the black. I think that pretty much wraps it up for the review.
Yeah, I think we covered everything.
Yep. You had to do me a favor for everyone that's watching. You had to follow Evan Filarca on Twitter if you have a Twitter. And please, please, please do me a huge favor and subscribe to this guy if you haven't already, because he has one of the best Spider-Man related videos. He is just amazing.
And please, everybody, do the exact same thing for No Punisher. He deserves just as much of support as you all give me. He's incredibly awesome. All his videos are fantastic. He's just a really awesome guy overall.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys.
Yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed our review of this movie.
Any last thoughts before we should end?
I think we got it all.
Yep. Thank you all so much for watching this video, guys, and please go and check out Evan Filarca. He deserves your attention. I'll leave a link. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy our review for Spider-Man 3, and let us know in the comments if you would like us to review Spider-Man 2.1 and review the editor's cut for Spider-Man 3, but I hope you guys did enjoy, and peace out, true believers, and have an amazing day, everybody.